You are listening to How to Get Over Your Ex, episode number 127, Living a Fairy Tale. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, breakup coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. All right, my brave hearts. I am coming to realize that I have officially created so many things I felt were impossible in my life that I am finally getting to this place where I really am understanding on a different level that it's never better here than it was there. People would always say this to me, and once you have once I personally had a full-time coaching business, I thought that things would be different. I mean, there's a bunch of scenarios here. People would be like, oh, once you have a full-time coaching business, you'll still think you have no time. Once you make money, you'll still feel like you don't have any. Once you attain X, you'll still feel Y if you don't clean up your thinking. I heard that, and now I'm really living that. Everything I wanted 5 years ago when I went through my horrendous breakup, I am now living. I live in Florida with the most handsome and perfect partner for me, most likely getting engaged soon and creating baby Marilyn. I have my own business. I work remote. I work for myself. I get to help millions of people and make lots of money, more than my ex, which was also a goal at one point. # no shame in that game. And I so many points in my business, things that I really wanted. I wanted to be helping millions of people, and we're at millions of downloads on the podcast. Being recognized by some of the most important people in my world, things like that, they're here and they're happening. And yet you'd think I'd feel like I'm living a fairy tale, right? And guess what? Nada. It's just so mind-blowing to me. Huge, epic things are happening in my life and I feel calm. It's so weird. Things that I thought I was going to be so excited for, I'm like, yeah, of course. And I still feel sadness at times. I still experience doubt and embarrassment and shame. I still get upset when people are mean to me on the internet. It's getting less and less now. I've actually had exes reach out trying to sue me because their exes, my amazing Braveheart clients, are doing so well. So now I've decided that all of my negative reviews on the podcast are actually just upset and disgruntled exes. But I also still get angry, and sometimes I wake up angry for no reason at all, and I get annoyed and bitter sometimes, more than I'd like to admit. And here's the thing. For a long time, I've seen life as this line, and you're going on this straight line, and then all of a sudden it has all kinds of lines that split off like forks in the road, and there's no back button or more forks that lead you back to old forks in the road, meaning once I pick a life path, I'm going to be stuck on that life path, and it's kept me from fully going all in on a specific route of life. I'm hoping some of you guys can resonate with that. Like too many options almost. And what that has resulted in for me is not living my fairy tale chapter. We're going to call it a chapter instead of an ending because it's never ending. But I haven't been being and enjoying what is already here in front of me. And as I say that, it's not an all or nothing. There have been times where I'm extremely present. And honestly, in 2020, I worked and I worked and I worked and I hustled to an extreme. And then in 2021, I messed around and I played and I did whatever I felt like. And both of them were amazing years and both of them had amazing results. But for 2022, I've come to realize that I want to intentionally live my fairy tale chapter. 2022 is going to be the chapter where I live inside of my fairy tale as the princess. Maybe a queen. I don't know yet. I want to live this chapter of my life and be in my fairy tale. And I'm sharing this all with you because I wonder how many of us are doing this. If you are fresh from heartbreak, you might think that you didn't see yourself here. 5 years ago, you thought you'd be engaged or still happily married or something along those lines. But what other areas of your life are exactly where you wanted them to be or even better that you might not be acknowledging? And for those of you who are avid listeners that have listened to the podcast since 2019 or our previous clients who are over their ex and you've been building the life that's bigger and better, are you acknowledging the fairy tale life that you've already built? And for me, at least, I've seen two issues at hand. Number one, identifying what the fairy tale chapter actually is. Remember that it's really a chapter, not the end of your book. So I'm currently living now, as a 31-year-old, I am living the fairy tale life I built at 26. I dreamt of the life that I'm living right now at 26 years old. And I'm exploring and uncovering what the fairy tale life of 36-year-old version of me will be. Recognizing that if I choose one fork in the road now, it is not permanent. This has been a huge lesson I've been learning. Having a child, this is like the example for me, but having the child is something that will impact the rest of my life, but is not going to prevent me from growing and changing. It's actually probably going to speed up that part, right? Kids are always growing and changing. There's no way that I could be stagnant by quote unquote settling down and having a family. And it's not preventing me from doing other forks in the road. So an example of this is travel. It's so fascinating to me that I thought I was going to travel the world back in 2016, 2017. Then I went out and built a business where I would be able to travel the world, and I still haven't, COVID. But I want to have a family now. And one of my limiting stories that I had around that was I wouldn't be able to travel, which is obviously so not true. Like there's so many Instagram things out there showing you how to travel with kids. But that's just like one example of how picking one fork in the road isn't going to prevent you. All the other forks aren't going to be closed off. So make sure you're not doing that, because I was. The second issue that I keep seeing around living a fairy tale is acknowledging that you're already there. Remembering that there are multiple fairy tale chapters in your life. And the more you acknowledge how you're already in a fairy tale, only creates more fairy tale qualities because you'll be looking for them. So example number one, I had to acknowledge I was like a successful breakup coach before I arrived to where I am today, that I was already living a fairy tale as a breakup coach. An example of this that I talked to my coach about was calm confidence created my success. Success didn't create my calm confidence. Example number two, I have to acknowledge how I'm already a great mom before I became a great mom or the kind of mom I want to be, right? And then example number three that I think is the most impactful for all of us to notice is when I was 26 going through my heartbreak, I was living a fairy tale I had at 21. Having my master's, working for a big consulting firm in a big city with a beautiful apartment was something I dreamt about and wanted so badly. And I was living that at 26 when I was going through in the midst of my heartbreak. But I wasn't like acknowledging it then. Isn't it crazy? Now, lastly, I think we're afraid to acknowledge the fairy tale when we are already living it because we think that if I acknowledge it, then maybe I'll stop striving for like the bigger and better. But I want you to look at the difference between when we believe I'm not living my fairy tale life versus when I believe I am living my fairy tale life, right? These are optional thoughts to have about your neutral circumstance of life. So neutral circumstance of life, your thought is, I'm not living my fairy tale life. I don't have that life. You feel disappointed and regretful. And when you feel that way, you ruminate, you sit in an action. I call it kind of like hands in the air, defeat. You might be comparing and despairing. You might get jealousy around what other people are doing. It's like the lack mentality. And all of that's going to create a result of I don't go out and create the life that I want, the fairy tale chapter. Versus having the neutral circumstance life, it's the same as before, and thinking I'm learning to acknowledge my fairy tale life, or I'm living my fairy tale I once had. You feel open and relieved. And when you feel open and relieved, you begin to explore. You do what you can to continue building what that looks like. You enjoy the present moment. You get curious about what's to come. And that results in I acknowledge and I live my fairy tale life. What? So here's what you need to do. 1, what is your fairy tale? What was your fairy tale 5 years ago? What is your fairy tale now? And what do you think your fairy tale will be 5 years from now? And look at the varying stages of that. And then identify how are you already living your fairy tale chapter? How is the journey towards your fairy tale chapter just as good as being inside of the chapter? After having lived through the journey and living with the result, what is that like? How different is the journey versus actually having the fairy tale? And could it be just as good, if not better, than the having of the result that you want? So with all that said, my word for 2022 is fairy tale. I would genuinely love to know what your word is for 2022. Share that with me on Instagram. You can find me at Breakup Coach Dorothy. And I hope you guys have an amazing week, a fairy tale week. And I will talk to you next time. If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.